let's talk about heat sensitivity, which is something that I've always struggled with my entire life. And particularly the last 7 days or so, where it's been a heat wave in the UK. Today's a little bit cooler, which is actually the reason I'm recording this, because I wanted to record this a bit sooner, but I just couldn't because I couldn't get comfortable. I felt flustered, irritable, and on edge just from this horrible, constant feeling of what I can only describe as a hot flush that women who are menopausal describe having. My ex-mother-in-law, I think that's right to call her my ex-mother-in-law, former mother-in-law, she always used to complain about having these hot flushes, and you'd see her almost get in a panic. And, she'll be having a hot flush, like fanning herself down with her hands whilst also trying to get clothes off quickly to deal with it. There's the kind of thing I've always had where you can suddenly get overheated and it can come on all of a sudden and you feel like the heat rising in your body, emanating all over and getting worse and worse and worse to the point you just have to start ripping your clothes off to cool down, or like reach for the nearest window and shove it open and stick your head out. But yeah, last week was a struggle, like more than a struggle. It's been unbearable, I would say. But as I mentioned on the last video, that my two boys and their mum were on a holiday for a week that I would have previously gone on, but because we're getting divorced, I didn't go on. And that meant I was at home by myself, and that I was able to just put my air conditioning unit on whenever I wanted, for however long I wanted, get the rooms that I was in to the coldest I could possibly make them. And it was quite bearable once I had that air conditioning unit going on. At bedtime, I'd take it upstairs to a bedroom and just let the air conditioning unit cool the room down before I'd try and go to sleep. Which was great until they eventually arrived home from their holiday and it was still extremely hot in this country. So my ex-partner is always someone that likes the house to be boiling hot. So that's always been a problem for me, because she would always turn the heat up when I'm like, why is the heating on? I'm so hot. And she'd be like, it's freezing. What are you talking about? And I don't know who's right and who's wrong. I guess neither person's right or wrong. It's just how you experience the temperature of the room. For me, I like it to be super cold. It doesn't have to be cold, actually, because I don't think I like being cold. But for me, I can be in a much colder room than other people can without feeling like it's freezing. And so, sorry, phone was ringing. It's totally ruined my train of thought. Is that ADHD? I think so. What was I saying? Yeah, I don't know. I don't know who's right or wrong about it being too hot or too cold, but I suppose it's subjective. So my idea of what feels right might be freezing for other people. Her idea of what's comfortable to me is like being in a furnace. So once they were home from their holiday and I would want to cool a room down, suddenly it's a problem. She'd always have excuses as to why she can't possibly have the room cooled down. And, I don't want my eyes drying out and stuff like that. I mean, she does have issues with eyes, but, not to the point where I don't think where having some air conditioning on in the room would really be a problem. It's just, she didn't want the noise probably and didn't find it too hot. So therefore it's a problem if I put the air conditioning unit on. And so it's just another reason why I'm actually really excited about moving to my own place, because anytime I want the house to be at a nice, cool, manageable temperature, I don't have anyone else to answer to except the boys when they live there 50% of the time. One of my children is like me. He really likes temperatures to be cool. He says he's a penguin, can happily live in the Antarctic in the freezing weather. You tell him to put a coat on because you think it's going to be a cold day. You don't want him to be cold all day at school. Take your coat with you. He'll say, no, I like the cold. And I know what he means. I love the cold as well. But, you can't send him to school without a coat. So he does have to take that. But anyway, back to the sensory challenge of heat. So yeah, it's something I've always struggled with. I remember as a kid, I would always be in the car and you'd have the sun beaming down on the window in the back seat on the way home from school or to school. And just that feeling of the heat from the sun, or just the feeling of the sun on your skin, would make me feel sick. And I remember being in the car just feeling sick. And the only way I could get rid of that feeling would be I used to sometimes unstrap myself without my mum knowing and sit in the footwell of the car behind the passenger seat. And obviously she wasn't aware that I'd done that, otherwise she would have told me to strap back in. Obviously I know it's totally unsafe now to do that, but that was my way of escaping the sun. If for some reason I was unable to do that, maybe there was some extra stuff in the footwell that meant that wasn't possible, or I'd been found out for unstrapping and sitting in the footwell, I would just have to try and fall asleep. So I used to like sort of rest my head on the seatbelt in a way that cradled it a bit like a sling for your head, kind of like a weird little pillow. And I'd fall asleep, but I'd always wake up feeling like, just headachy, and it's just that sun being on me. So I carried that dislike for sun being on my skin throughout my whole life, even to the point where we would go on holiday to like the Algarve once. Scorching hot temperatures. We had a swimming pool there, but when we arrived at the villa, got all our bags in the house, unpacked a few things, and everyone went to go and sit outside by the pool. And I remember everyone being absolutely astonished that I could be sat there outside in the sun wearing a zip-up fleece, not jacket, not even a hoodie. It was just a fleece top that had a zip. And I'd be sat there outside, everyone else sat down on like loungers, and I was in my hoodie. And they just like, what are you doing? It's boiling hot. But I remember, yeah, I can feel the heat of the place, but the fleecy zip-up thing is protecting my skin from the sun being on it, which to me just feels super uncomfortable. Like you can really feel it's not, and I do burn easily, but I don't burn super quickly, so I can be in the sun without burning. But I remember just being in this hoodie or slash fleece, and people saying, "What is he doing? Why is he in this fleece in this hot weather?" And yeah, it was just that was better than having the sun on me. So when I say I've got heat sensitivity, definitely have a heat sensitivity where it bothers me, it makes me irritable, I don't know what to do with myself, and that kind of thing. But equally, I just don't like the sensation of sun on my skin. So I don't know if that part of it is strictly a heat sensitivity, because, it can be mildly warm whilst being a bit sunny, and I still don't like that feeling of sun on my skin. But I think it's amplified when it's also really hot temperature. So yeah, being indoors where there's no sun getting directly to you, it's just this emanating feeling going over you, like pulsing over your whole body of just pure heat discomfort. I don't know how else to describe it. Yeah, there'll be times when you'll be working on your PC, winter time perhaps, and someone in the house would have put the heating on, and I'm working away by the PC where I do my work, which is right next to a radiator that for a lot of the time is just off. So you're sat next to this radiator, it doesn't bother you because it's not on. And then suddenly you realise at some point, some time ago, it got switched on. So you're doing your work, suddenly you feel the heat. And it's once you suddenly realise just how hot you're getting, and you're like, wait, is this radiator on? And you feel the heat of the radiator. Like, once you know the radiator's been on, it's like that's when the panic sets in. And yeah, you can just start feeling like this constant rising temperature. I mean, just thinking about it now, I just felt that in my chest, actually. It's really strange. And it's just the most discomforting thing I can describe. Well, actually, eye contact's probably worse. But the point is, yeah, it just sends you into a bit of a panic where you just reach for a window, shove it open, your hoodie's getting yanked off. And that's particularly bad if you're in the car. You're driving along, you're strapped in, and then suddenly you realise you're too hot. Obviously, you can quickly put the aircon on, open a window, but often that's not enough. You need that hoodie off. And then when you're trying to drive, taking your hoodie off is very difficult and probably dangerous. So, yeah, that can be horrible. But then it's also probably quite dangerous to have that sensation of like you're melting down in the heat and then still be expected to pay attention and drive. What else about heat bothers me? I've no idea if this is related in any way. I don't think it is, but I feel like I don't know where else I would mention this except for a video all about heat sensitivity where I've already mentioned the sun. But you know how some people get SAD, Seasonal Affective Disorder, so they start to get depressed when we go from summer to winter because they're no longer getting the sun. You know, so I think I've read that the reason people get that is from a lack of vitamin D or something. Something that you get from the sun that you suddenly don't get in the winter. But I've always experienced it the other way around. I've always said I'm a winter person. Love the winter. And I know it's because I don't get on very well in the sun. I hide out indoors in the summertime a lot of the time. And when it's winter, I still do that hiding out inside because obviously it's drizzling and rainy outside. But you don't feel quite so bad doing it in the winter. It feels cozy and like right to be inside. And there's nothing nicer than being inside while it's wet and cold outside. It's nice and cozy. But during the summer and you're feeling like you're stuck inside, I find that a little bit like, you know, not that I even want to be outside, but you feel like everyone else is outside. You should probably be doing something outside as well that you can't normally do when it's winter. Yeah, I don't know if something about when it goes from winter to summer, I actually start to feel the effects of seasonal affective disorder. But obviously it can't be to do with vitamin deficiencies because obviously you're not missing the sun because it's summertime. So I don't know what that's about, but I thought it was worth mentioning. Yeah, every year, it's when it starts becoming a bit sunny. So maybe sort of sometime in spring when it then starts to turn more like summer. I do feel that slight depression creeping in that people with seasonal affective disorder would describe. I've mentioned that to a few people in the past and no one can really relate. But then I guess I've probably not asked many neurodivergent people about that. So maybe you do and tell me in the comments. I remember as a kid, my favourite thing to do, my favourite time of year was when, you know, I was at school. So you'd get home from school. It'd be like 4:30, I think. It could have been 5 o'clock in the evening. I think it was 4:30. I used to love watching Neighbours, the Australian soap. If you're British, you'll know exactly what I mean by that. If you're Australian, you probably know, but I feel like Neighbours perhaps wasn't that popular in Australia, even though it's set in Australia. But for some reason, British people loved Neighbours. Well, I know I did. I used to get in from school, put on Neighbours at sort of 4:30, 5 o'clock, whatever time it was. And I used to love it. There's nothing better than when it was drizzling rain outside. You're inside in cosy warm, not too hot, but nice and warm. While I had my TV at the end of my bed. It's only a little thing. But with Neighbours on. And there was no better time of day or day of the week than when I was doing that, eating a bag of crisps. That's what I used to do. Bag of crisps, Worcester sauce flavour, whilst watching Neighbours at 4:30 with the rain coming down outside and darkness outside. Loved it. Absolutely. So I guess that was sort of a Halloween-ish time, sort of October sometime, maybe a little before. Yeah, that was always my favourite time of year. And I don't remember ever feeling too hot back when I lived at home with my parents. Although in that house, we did used to have sort of built-in air conditioning. So we were quite lucky there. So when I felt too hot, there was a little panel on the door, on the wall outside my bedroom. Not just for my room, but it did the whole house. And you could just switch it on and then you'd feel like this light breeze coming from this little vent in the ceiling. And then before you know it, you've got a lovely cold room. But I remember my older brother used to switch it off. So there was a bit of thermostat wars going on. It wasn't, I think there was a thermostat. You could switch down how cold you wanted it. But I think I always left it on the coldest. And what I'd do is I'd get too hot and just go and switch that thing on. And I'd feel like, oh, this is lovely. And then before you know it, you can feel that, like that light air coming in through the vent. Suddenly it's gone. I'm like, oh, someone turned it off. Didn't hear anyone turning it off. And it turns out it was my brother. And I was like, did you do you keep turning off the air conditioning unit? And he goes, yeah, I don't want it drying my skin out. And I was like, oh, use a moisturiser. It's horribly hot in this house if we don't have that on. And there was always a bit of a argument over using it. Yeah, growing up, I didn't have to experience being overheated too much, I don't think. But then sharing a house from whatever age I met my now ex-partner and moved in together, we didn't have the luxury of built-in air conditioning. And we had a thermostat, obviously, to control the heating. And I always found she put it on too often, too hot. And I remember sometimes just literally suddenly realising you're too hot, but it's like your blood boiling. That's how hot it felt. They'd be like, why is the heating on 24 degrees? And she goes, oh, I was cold. I was like, well, why'd you put it on 24? I think she thought, oh, I'm cold. If I crank it up as high as I possibly can get it, it will heat up quicker. Which I don't think it works like that. You know, you'd rush to it and switch it off and then have to stand outside the front door to cool down again. And there's so many times that's happened in this house as well. So when I was telling that story, I was thinking of back when we lived in a flat, which was a ground floor flat. So we didn't have the heat from downstairs rising up or anything like that. It just was just unbearable. And thinking about it, I'm feeling that sort of hot flush feeling I described come over me, just thinking about those times where I got hot. So what happens when I get too hot, I definitely become quite heavy in my head and headachy. I become snappy and irritable. Like if people ask me to do stuff, especially if I'm already doing something, I can't help it. It just makes you feel on edge. Like all you can really think and concentrate on is how am I going to get cooler? Like right now. So when people start asking you to do stuff, that's kind of a barrier to getting yourself to a comfortable state. So I guess that's why I get a bit snappy. But yeah, it is one of the worst things I think I can experience. What is weird is it's not gradual. You don't go, oh, I feel like it's getting a bit warm in here. It suddenly hits you just how hot you're feeling. And then once you come to that realization, that's it. Then these waves of heat pulsing through you, you're suddenly aware of it. And it feels like panic mode. Yeah. So anyway, I hope that helps someone. I don't think it helps. I don't think I've said anything helpful whatsoever. Just sharing my experience of it. If heat sensitivity resonates with you, maybe share your thoughts in the comments about how it affects you and to what extremes. And yeah, maybe like and subscribe if you want to hear more videos like this. I'm going to do a video like this for each of my difficulties and traits and things like that as and when. So hopefully you get something out of this and I'll continue to make some videos like this. Yeah, have a good day. Cheers. Bye.